Hi, everybody. I'm Rick Beato. Yesterday, I had the opportunity to interview one of my guitar heroes. He is American blues, jazz, and rock guitarist Robben Ford. For those of you not familiar with Robben has been well known, and I've known of his playing since the early 70s, so 5 decades or so. He played as a sideman with Jimmy Witherspoon, the LA Express, Joni Mitchell on the Miles of Isles record and Hissing of Summer Lawns. He played with Miles Davis, the Yellow Jackets, Larry Carlton. He's played with everybody. He also has some incredible solo records like Schizophrenic, City Life, Talk to Your Daughter. More recently, Purple House, The Inside Story is an older album. And it was a real honor for me to hear him talk about his career over these past 5 decades. If you listen through till about 29 minutes, he tells some hilarious stories of being in Miles Davis's band. You have to check that out. So without further delay, here is my interview with the great Robben Ford. Okay. Hey, everybody. I have the distinct honor of being here with Robben Ford, who's one of my all-time idols. I don't even know what to say. I told him that I'm way too nervous to be holding a guitar here sitting next to him, so I'm just going to be the guitar stand for this. And if he needs a little bit of backing, I can do that. I can totally handle that. But Robben, thank you so much for this. So I want to talk. I'm going to try and ask you questions that you haven't been asked before. Mm-hmm. I don't know how that's going to come out.
All right. We can try.
I was listening to the first Yellow Jackets record on the way up here, and which I mean I'm familiar with. I've been familiar with you since the 70s, and that record is really that's an incredible record, and it's really a fusion record, and it has the blues playing that you do in it. You hint at the blues, but it's so much. It's a really sophisticated fusion record. I hate that term fusion, but it's harmonically it's so sophisticated. I want you to talk about your blues playing and then your jazz playing and how you incorporate those two things and why. What about jazz is interesting to you, and what about blues is interesting to you?
Well, it's interesting to me that you would bring up that record because I actually just recently listened to a few tracks, and I don't remember why it came up, but somehow the record came up. I actually used a couple of the chord progressions from the solos for some instructional material, so that's why I checked it out. I just needed something to play over that was jazzy.
Right.
So this seems to be up for me right now for some reason. But listening to it, made me both laugh, but also, kind of proud of what we did.
Yeah.
But there was a ton of blues playing on those records, actually. And, where you hear the jazz influence is really in any kind of a altered 5-chord situation.
Yes.
Which
a lot of altered 5, a lot of great lines on there that I stole from that record. When I heard that, and I heard you playing over those altered chords, that sound I had never really heard. It was that time period when I was
well, with the loud electric guitar, that wasn't something that was happening really too much at that time. First guy I ever heard do it was Terry Haggerty. With Sons of Champlin. Are you familiar with Terry a little bit? I think, to my knowledge, he was the first guy to crank up I think he played through a Birdland. He's probably playing through a Twin. And cranked it up and, played some other notes.
What is it about those notes that sound so good with a loud electric guitar?
Well, it takes it much closer to, a tenor saxophone or a trumpet or... It makes it more harmonically, it's spread out more, harmonically. You just hear more in the sound. I mean, honestly, for me, that's why I always talk about the blues guitar players and saxophone players.
Yes.
Because blues guitar, you have all that too. And you have a a variety of tones as well. They don't all sound the same. And jazz guitar, for the most part, was a big-bodied instrument on the rhythm pickup.
Yeah.
Everybody, you know. And I remember getting my first jazz instrument, which was an L5. I bought an L5. And the treble pickup was just unusable.
It's like, why did they even put those on?
Yeah, and I was into tenor players anyway, so for me, it didn't matter. I didn't care. So it was all rhythm pickup and trying to play like saxophone players that I was enjoying and admiring at that time. But fundamentally, having no education and having no idea how to really play through chord changes, you know, and particularly 2-5-1. That's kind of what the jazz thing boils down to.
Yeah.
2-5-1 chord progression. And I distilled that, of course, just to the altered 5 chord. Kind of skipped the 2 chord.
You don't need it.
No. And so that's what you hear in my playing on the Yellow Jackets record.
It's very horn-like. It's very sax-like to me.
Well, and again, it's a lot of blues playing, and then there's the altered chord, you know.
As far as your harmonic vocabulary chord-wise, how did you incorporate those types of voicings that are historically the jazz players would play, and then you incorporated them into your blues playing?
Yeah. Well, I learned all my chords out of Mickey Baker's book, the first one, and started incorporating them, and very, very easily into a blues band.
Yeah.
I mean, it's the same music, you know. And then at some point I realized that I didn't know how to play over those chords, improvise through them, over them, you know. So I learned scales out of a book, you know, once again. And it's like, okay, that's that chord. That's that, altered 5 chord sound.
Yeah.
I'd already learned the diminished scale, but for me, the half step, whole step scale.
Yep.
But for me, that initially was a 1 chord jam, because that's the way I learned it. It was, much more of a static chord as opposed to an altered 5 chord to me.
Yeah.
Like a raised 9 chord. So the half diminished, half whole tone scale had much more that sound of an altered 5 chord to me, but eventually, clearly the diminished scale could be used as an altered chord, and I like 13 flat 9 as opposed to flat 13 raised 9 chord. I would use that, I just gravitated toward that diminished scale sound,
But you also do use that altered scale with the sharp 5 in there. And
with the Yellow Jackets on that record, I was playing that scale probably more.
Yes, which is interesting because that's, in your playing, I hadn't heard you play those sounds, and that's specific to that, on that particular record. There's, you play that, and that's the thing that first caught my ear, because I didn't hear a lot of people doing that in a rock context.
Right. Yeah. It was. I don't think even Larry Carlton was doing it with the Crusaders.
No.
So they were playing much more kind of 1 chord bluesy things, So it was a very early appearance of that kind of approach in fusion music.
What do you think about that term, fusion music?
Well, I've never liked it either.
Yeah.
But it does, Miles Davis didn't like the word jazz.
That's true.
But it kind of describes the genre in a way that people identify. What else would you call it?
I know.
Rock jazz, jazz rock.
Jazz rock.
Jazz rock fusion.
What do you think of the sophistication of audiences back in the 70s and 80s? Exactly.
I'm sorry.
No, but the sophistication that people used to have back in the 70s and 80s in comparison to nowadays, as far as harmonic sophistication the listeners had.
Honestly,
can you talk about that?
It's kind of an interesting question, because I don't know why that door opened. I don't know why that, sonic window opened to where fusion, quote, that mixture of jazz and rock, actually became popular in some way. Like it's a phenomenon to me. Now, there weren't a lot of bands that were popular.
No.
There were just a few, really. But, I mean, Weather Report they were a big act,
Huge.
And particularly internationally. And Miles Davis, the same thing. Those guys could go overseas and play to anywhere from, 5 to 15,000 people on their own, That doesn't happen, I don't think, to anybody anymore.
No.
So why that happened, I'm not sure. But there was just a nice little evolution, like blues kind of came back into some kind of favor, and then rock players started incorporating not only blues, but they were listening to Miles Davis and John Coltrane, Grateful Dead, even bands like that. They were trying to do what Coltrane and Miles Davis and others were already doing way better than those guys ever would. But they were trying, And I don't know, maybe that just kind of allowed people to kind of get it. And, Miles Davis came on very strong with the mixture of rock and jazz, and he was enough of a legend, I don't know. It's interesting that happened. But it happened, and it eventually sort of,
Why, though? Why do you think?
I think for reasons that are so broad, you could call it the cell phone, might have just killed virtually everything culturally. So I would get very dramatic about answering a question like that, because it's painful to me, to see, what we're seeing, what's happened to music. It's been devastated, in every way, financially, quality. It's just been smashed to bits, like it's very hard to be an artist, a true artist in this world today. And, everybody's thinking much more about how to sell their product because nobody's paying for it anymore. So how do you monetize it?
Right.
Than making actually great music. It's very hard,
Can you talk about improvisation and the importance of that in music?
Well, to me it's a way of life, and to many others, it's personal expression, So it's it's desiring to say something, it's a need to express oneself. That's what improvisation is, right? And that improvisation can be done in absolutely any medium. Jazz has just been this fantastic evolution of improvisation through music. So it's a spiritual thing. Actually improvisation is it's a spiritual thing, even though I'm not hearing much spirituality in much improvisation these days. Like technique has become the art, as opposed to like actually have kind of feeling the need to say something. So this mixture, like, people don't know about the blues. Nobody knows about the blues anymore. And in America, that's where the spiritual thread can be traced back to. It goes back to the church and things, and nature and things like that. So if you don't have that connection, I don't know, man. I don't think it's it's almost impossible for a Westerner to do anything with any kind of heart if he doesn't have a connection to that, where music is concerned, I feel. Even Gil Evans. So, no more sophisticated kind of, iconoclastic, big band arranger and everything. A friend of mine told me they were walking through an airport, and Gil Evans was sitting waiting for a plane with a boombox listening to Muddy Waters cranked up. Now that, is what I'm talking about. It's like, you can be the most sophisticated person in the world, but if you don't have that connection to the blues, to me, there's big time something going to be missing in your playing. And it's that spiritual element.
Also, the ability to make every live performance different. Improvisation is critical in that.
Yeah, although I can go to a show where people are improvising and every song sounds the same to me.
Well, at least there's the chance of it being different every time.
I don't know. It's like rearranging deck chairs on the Titanic, as far as I'm concerned. It's more like the element of melody. and soulfulness and expression, you know. I mean, you can play things, you know, backwards, forwards, upside down, but it still sounds the same if you don't have that, you know, personal expression in there, you know.
If I said to you, what are some of the greatest solos? What are some of your favorite solos by other people?
Yeah, I mean, I like, actually, I'm not quite sure why, but before you sort of finished your question, I was thinking about Mike Bloomfield on the first Paul Butterfield Blues Band album. There's a song called Our Love Is Driftin', and it's just this wailing slow blues, you know. But that is a blues. And just my second thought is Paul Desmond. And again, then I kind of, like that whole record, Take 5, Paul Desmond is the composer of the song Take 5. And that whole album, the way Paul Desmond plays on that record, is, you know, that's very deep, you know, within my DNA. And he also did a record called Desmond Blue. Did you ever hear that?
Yeah.
And Jim Hall's on guitar.
Amazing.
And that record is my favorite Jim Hall that I ever heard. And, you know, often these things, I think it's really because it's the first thing you heard by this artist and you connected with it. So it could have been something else potentially. But also the sound of those records are very lush and warm, you know, like golden kind of sounding to me. Particularly Take 5, that album. So, you know, the first things that I really connected with in improvisation were with people who sounded like they were talking to me. You know, not people who were blowing me away with their, you know, amazingness, you know. So improvisation for me always had that element of communication going on, you know, as opposed to showing what you can do.
Speech through phrasing and through being able to play phrases, one that leads naturally to the next, like Paul Desmond.
Tone.
And tone.
Yeah. There's a person there. There's personality.
And they're telling a story through what they're playing.
They're talking to you.
Okay, as far as players that are the great storytellers in their instrumental improvisations, who are people that inspire you or inspired you?
Paul Desmond, Jim Hall, Sonny Rollins, Miles Davis, John Coltrane did it a lot, but he also did a lot of other things. But completely capable of just playing the simplest thing and really expressing something. I was a big fan, and still am, of Roland Kirk and big time Archie Shep.
Yeah.
Particularly the records that he did for Impulse, and in particular a record called The Way Ahead. That was like the first jazz album I ever purchased with my own money, and didn't know what I was buying, but I wanted to learn about jazz. And, you know, here was a black man playing an alto saxophone. I'm like, well, that's probably jazz. And so I bought the record, and it was Ornette Coleman, New York Is Now, you know, with Elvin Jones, Dewey Redman, and Jimmy Garrison. So it couldn't have been more challenging, you know, in a way. And the second one that I bought, because, okay, black guy saxophone, Archie Shep, The Way Ahead. And that is just like full of politics, you know what I mean? And emotion, rage, you know, beauty, history, incredible, really an incredible record, you know, in terms of, oh my gosh, that's just amazing. So those records and Miles Davis's records with Tony Williams and Ron Carter, Herbie Hancock, Wayne Shorter. Wayne Shorter also looms very large for me in terms of influence, kind of in a different way.
Where do you go from here musically? All the things that you've done your whole life.
Yeah.
What is left undone right now?
A hit record? I wouldn't mind that.
Okay.
I've had semi-hit records, you know, and records that have made a lot of noise, but, you know, never a true hit record have I had. That would be fun. I'm not counting on it or even, like, working toward it. in particular, I can tell you that what I'm really concentrating on right now is producing records.
Mm-hmm.
And this is very exciting for me, and it's actually... I wish I'd come to Nashville a long time ago, man, because it's just such an amazingly rich musical community here. The resources are incredible, and also the welcome I've received here has stunned me. How warm the welcome has been, how open the doors are. It's like just amazing. Making records it's just about the best thing you can do as an artist. Being a cog in somebody else's wheel. Not so much. It's a job, But if you're actually working with people who are all like interested in your creativity, and excited to be there with you, and you with them, this kind of thing, this is the environment that I work to create whenever I do a record. It's like, let's do this.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody's equally important kind of attitude, even though actually I'm the most important. I am kidding. But just that kind of collaboration, I don't have a home studio because I don't want one. I want an engineer who actually knows how to do that.
Yeah.
A studio that's cool. I want to go there. I don't want to stay home. You go into a studio, it's very different than a live performance.
When you are playing and you're in the studio,
Mm-hmm.
how important is your sound? I mean, obviously it's extremely important, but as far
Mm-hmm.
as what you play is really what you have to really be inspired by your sound, by what you're
Yeah.
hearing in the headphones or
Mm-hmm.
wherever you're playing. Do you prefer to play with headphones on if you're playing in the studio, or do you like to play through monitors or with nothing?
Generally, for me, the best thing is, one ear on, one ear off, and my amplifier, like if it's in a room, door open a bit.
Mm-hmm.
So I need that interaction with my amp. Sometimes you can get nice things happening in front of a couple of speakers and a console,
Yeah.
sitting in a chair sometimes.
Yeah.
But honestly, it's a real trip. Getting your sound and being comfortable in the
hardest
studio.
thing.
It is.
It is.
Yeah, so I'm still learning about those things because I've always, I've used my Dumble amplifier, Overdrive Special,
Yep.
built by Alexander Dumble in 1982 or 3. That's when I got that amp. I've used that on every record I've ever made. My records,
Yeah.
And I used to use it on other people's records, but it needs to be out in an open room. It's a live amplifier, and this is something that's came home to me very clearly on my last record,
Mm-hmm.
Purple House. We couldn't fit it. We couldn't fit it into the record because the record had been recorded in tight rooms.
Yeah.
And the amp just didn't fit. So that was the first time I really got it. It's like, this doesn't work in every situation. Because of the way where we recorded, how we recorded, we needed everything. The guitars had to be coming through small amps. Just the way it was. So I started getting interested in smaller amplifiers,
Such as?
Well, I made my last record. It's called Purple House.
Mm-hmm.
And all of the rhythm parts on that record were done through an old Blackface Pro Reverb,
Mm-hmm.
the rhythm guitars. And all the solos were done through a reissue Vibrolux Custom, which I plugged a 12-inch speaker into it because it had two 10s.
Mm-hmm.
So I used a single 12 cabinet and I think without exception, with some kind of an overdrive pedal on it. There's one song on the record that isn't overdriven, and that is, I think I might even have played that through somebody else's amplifier. But I didn't have the amp for that record. I had to buy.
If I said to you, Robben, what sound, as far as your solo tone, on what record is your favorite?
I think my favorite guitar solo on record, sound, everything,
Okay.
is the guitar solo on Rose of Sharon from the Into the Sun album.
Mm-hmm.
I think I can actually say that's my favorite recorded guitar solo. So that's something.
Do you pick up your guitar every day, or do you ever go long periods of time without playing it?
Well, I can go certainly a full day without playing it. And when I was touring more,
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't pick up a guitar for like 2 weeks after I got home. Sometimes 3, because I just was tired of it. So I generally play the guitar with a reason. I pick up the guitar for a reason. I don't pick it up just to play guitar. I pick it up because I need to write something. I pick it up because I want to work on something that came to mind.
Mm-hmm.
For reasons like that. I don't sit and play for enjoyment very much.
Mm-hmm.
Generally, it's for a reason, and therefore, a little time goes by without playing it. It's not unusual for me.
Is there something that you want to talk about that nobody ever asks you about?
Yeah, you did a pretty good job so far of asking me questions that I hadn't been asked before, which is great. I mean, we really got pretty deep there for a minute.
Do you ever think, I wish I said this, or I wish people would ask me about this?
I can only say that the subject of songwriting is something I really enjoy,
Mm-hmm.
and it's something that really changed my relationship to songs. Like my appreciation for a song certainly became greater through that.
Mm-hmm.
And my appreciation of lyrics, in particular, was my appreciation was greatly enhanced, and also my appreciation for words, language, how things are said, all of that. And what came to mind here is, I'll bring an entire record, to a group of musicians that have been hired to make this record.
Mm-hmm.
They're all great players, Everybody's great. I'm like, okay, here's this song, So I'll sing and play this new song for them, And honestly, I'll tell you, I'm always, I don't know if nervous is the right word, but a little
apprehensive, maybe.
It's like, is this song, any good or not? I don't know. No one's ever heard it before.
Right.
So, and we'll go through the whole process of learning the song, and everybody will work at it, and it's like, oh man, I love the sound of the bass, and it's like, wow, yeah, man, drums sound cool. Well, how'd you record that? Really good, etc., etc. Good sounds. Great track, great feel. But nobody ever goes, cool lyric, man. Wow, that's really interesting.
Robben, it's probably the people that you're playing with. They're not thinking about things like that.
Musicians are musicians.
That's right.
I was the same way. But to a songwriter, it's a little frustrating.
Yeah.
It's like nobody ever goes, cool lyric. You still don't know if they like it or not. That's one of the things that came to mind. And talking about songwriting, once again, is a favored subject. Even though I've kind of come full circle with that now, and now I'm back to the Epiphone on the rhythm pickup, writing, instrumental music and playing with people who are, able to improvise, on a really high level. And wow, I mean, working with, Bill, Daryl Jones, and Keith Carlock on this last record is like incredible. Wow, it's really cool too.
Yeah,
it turned out really well. I'm very excited about it.
I mean, you've played with everybody, but you still get that feeling when you play with great players like that. It's exciting, right?
Oh, yes, and it's generally, a guy like myself. I put together a band and go out and tour my music, right?
Yep.
And I have a vision of how I want my music to sound, and I kind of, it's a little bit more of a direction, but I let people play. I want them to generally play more than they do. But, working with guys like this, it's a collaboration.
Yeah.
So it's like, I may want it to go a different way, but it's not going to go that way. And I'm not going to tell him, because, he's himself, and he's being himself, and he's reacting to me the way I am to him, and it's like, all right, this is what happens to soup, and you're one aspect of that soup. So you don't have to even think about directing it. You don't have to have an attitude or an opinion about what it's supposed to be. And the more you just let it be that, now we're talking. On the improvisational thing, that's when it really does get exciting, and you find yourself doing things that you wouldn't have thought of had you not been pushed into it.
This is something that I thought about. I was watching you play with Miles Davis. There's videos for those of you that are on YouTube here, which you're watching this on YouTube. Go check out Robben playing with Miles Davis. And what's it feel like with Miles Davis? Do you even think about that when you were playing with him? That, yeah, I'm playing with Miles Davis. He's right on stage with you.
Well, that's far more the salient aspect of it, is you are in his world.
Are you aware of it when you're playing?
Oh, absolutely. 100% of the time, every moment. You know where you are.
What would Miles say after a set? Would he ever say anything?
Miles would leave the stage before the band did and disappear.
Mm-hmm.
He'd get in a limo, go to his hotel.
Mm-hmm.
And he generally traveled separately from us.
Okay.
Occasionally we were on a flight together.
Yeah.
But still,
Would he wear headphones and not talk to anyone?
Well, he definitely would just do his own thing.
Yeah.
And
he must have communicated with you, though, before you go on stage or something, right? And said...
Nah. He
you
did a few times in odd places.
Okay.
Because before we went on stage, also he, you wouldn't see him, and you'd all be by the side of the stage, and then Miles would just sort of kind of walk out, and he'd have his trumpet, and he'd just kind of be walking around, and his tour manager's trying to hook up his wireless to him, and he'd just keep walking. And Miles Davis, and we'd all go out and pick up our instruments, and he just, so he didn't talk to you, or after the show, and we didn't travel together. But every now and then there would be a situation where, you were indeed in the same room with him.
Okay.
And those situations were always, of course, entirely unique. I'll give you an example. We arrived at a hotel after traveling together that day, and we weren't getting a lot of sleep.
Mm-hmm.
So what the routine was, you went to your hotel, you ordered some room service, you ate something, and you took a nap, and then you got up and you went to sound check, and that's the way the day went.
Right.
Up early, travel a long time, all that. So I'm in my room. I've ordered room service, and knock at the door, and it's Robert Irving, who was the musical director.
Mm-hmm.
He says, "Wow, Miles wants to see you," like as if Miles wants to see me, in particular.
Uh-huh.
It turns out, the whole band had actually been, told to come to the room. But when I walk in, there's only Bob Berg sitting on a couch. Like the door's open, I just walk in, and Bob Berg's sitting on a couch at the far side of the room there. And Miles is standing in front of him, and he's eating a chicken wing. And then he just starts walking towards me while he's eating this chicken wing. And he walks right up to my face like this, And then he goes, "Do you want some chicken?" So... And then we sat around for, about 20 minutes, a half an hour. The whole band kind of straggled in. And he just kind of wanted the band in the room for a while. And I don't even remember what he said or what happened, He said a couple of funny things, I remember. And then he said, "Man, I'm going to bed." So that was that. And we all left. That was the kind of thing that would happen, I'd see him just before, he's about to walk out,
Mm-hmm.
He'd say something. He was very complimentary. He would call me on the phone, and I lived across the park from him in New York at that time when I was playing with him.
Mm-hmm.
And, I'd answer the phone. He goes, "Robben, listen to this." And he put a little cassette player, this is the 80s,
Yeah.
Up to the phone and just, that's all you hear. And he goes, "You're playing your ass off." It was sweet. We had some actual real, person to person, like kind of moments that way. And one of my favorites, so I had already, was leaving the band, but I had like 5 more shows. We were somewhere, and it was right before going on stage, and all of us were at the side of the stage, and for some reason Miles, was actually there with us hanging, and he walked up to me, he took my hand, and he starts shaking my hand, and he starts doing it like 5 different ways. There's a bump, there's this and that, I started doing this, I'm sitting in the chair looking up at him, he's standing there, and he starts telling me this story about, when Cannonball Adderley joined the quintet, so now it's a sextet, so Coltrane's the other player.
Yeah.
And, they came off stage, after playing a blues, and, they were playing Straight No Chaser or something like that, no doubt, And Cannonball said to Miles, "What was that?" Miles said, "It's the blues, And Cannonball said, "Ain't like no blues I ever played." And he's telling me the story, all the while kind of shaking my hand like this. And it was just sort of like, it was like he was kind of including me in his world.
Right.
In a way that just, I'm warmed by it, It's like, wow, like he was treating me like a musician, that he liked, He liked the way I played, and he let me know that. And so, it makes me emotional, even to think about it, that I actually got that kind of props, from really probably the most influential musician for me in my life, I mean, the blues players, B.B. King, he would be on that, that would be just as powerful, and sure wish that I'd been able to spend a little time with Mike Bloomfield, but he just went away a little too soon, but that was awesome. And I quit the band after about 5.5, 6 months, because I just signed to Warner Brothers, and honestly the situation around him, the management didn't really treat us well. The band was just kind of a disparate bunch of people, didn't feel like a group, didn't have a band feeling to it, and I just like, okay, I think it's, and he started tightening up the music, started playing more, he's like, "Play that shit just like the record, Robben," talking about the album Tutu.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
And I'm like, well, it's like, that's not why you go play with Miles Davis.
Right.
And for me, and my career was just about to begin as my solo career. So I split, and he said to me, "You ever want to come back, you just come back."
Wow.
And that's like, what better thing could you hear,
Exactly.
It was great. It was really awesome. It really was.
Wow.
Whew.
Thank you so much.
My pleasure, Rick. Thank you, man.
That's all for now. Please subscribe here to my Everything Music YouTube channel. If you're a first-time viewer, don't forget to ring the bell. Very important. If you're interested in the Beato book, go to my website at www.rickbeato.com. Follow me on Instagram at rickbeato1. Check out the Beato ear training method at beatoeartraining.com. You want to get a good ear and be able to figure out these things really fast? Try my ear training course. And if you want to support the channel even more, think about becoming a member of the Beato Club. Thanks so much for watching.